Welcome to episode 144 of the Campus Comics Cast. In this episode, will we get a cameo appearance? Who knows? Stick around and listen and find out. But for now, you're stuck with Scott Reed, joined by
Mike Atchison
and Chad Schubert.
And in this episode, we're going to give some of our, we're just going to talk a little bit about a certain surprise at the end of Black Adam. We're not going to go deep dive into Black Adam, but just talk about a little surprise at the end of Black Adam. And then we're going to talk about Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow.
That's correct.
Okay, make sure I got that title right. You know, you figure having read that, I would know what the title of the book that I read was. And then we're going to talk about Black Stars Above. And then we're going to, of course, wrap up the episode with the CLZ Shake. So a lot going on in this episode. We probably should just dive in. So, okay, spoilers for anybody who has not seen Black Adam. All right, if you've not seen Black Adam yet and don't want to be spoiled, then you probably need to skip ahead 3 or 4 minutes, right? So skip. All right. So, and we have Shad's permission to spoil this particular part of it. So there, I've dragged that out long enough to give you a chance to skip and go past it. So. All right, so Black Adam. I made a post on Facebook because I had heard a rumor that we were going to get a great cameo. All right, and I sat through the entire movie. It didn't happen. And this is after the rumor that at San Diego Comic-Con that DC was going to make a Henry Cavill announcement with Superman. Nothing came of that announcement. So here we are. I'm sitting in the theater watching Black Adam. Saw that there was one credit scene, so I'm waiting around for the credit scene. Still surprised that even in a DC movie, people are getting up and walking out. It's like, check your phone or something before you leave. All right, and lo and behold, it starts with Amanda Waller, and I'm like, okay. So we got Amanda Waller scene. That's not bad. You know, it's tying it all into the regular universe. That's good. And then she's like, okay, she's talking about sending the big guns if Black Adam gets out of line, right?
Yeah.
All right. But then a figure lands, and I'm still like, okay, they've done the Shadow Superman before. We're not going to get Superman. And then finally, walking out of the shadows in his full attire, Henry Cavill Superman. This is the happiest that I have been in a DC movie in a very long time.
Can I tell you what the kid next to me said?
Is it quotable on a non-explicit podcast? Yes. Okay, go for it.
Henry Cavill walked out of that shadow you just described. Mm-hmm. The kid said simply, "Woo!" I'd never been in a theater where the guy next to me was so excited, and I was right there with him. I was clapping, and I mean, you definitely got caught up in the moment.
Right.
Because I was worried about the same thing when I seen the silhouette. I'm like, please don't do the whole Shazam thing.
Yeah. Or the Peacemaker thing.
Yeah. I'm like, come on. But yeah, this was, I think it was well done. It was, you can't really get into it to the whys too much because that would get into Black Adam's story. But Amanda Waller's there to say, look, have it your way. Your prison is Kandak. You're staying right there in Kandak. Whatever. And he's like, fine. But she says, if you get out of line, you step 1 foot out of Kandak, we're sending the big guns after. He says, there's not a big enough gun that can take me on this earth.
Yeah.
And she says, well, I can make a call to someone who's not of this earth. And that's why I'm going, what?
Okay. Now here's the big question. Based on this, and we talked about this news report in the last episode, new head of DC Entertainments, right? James Gunn, Peter Safran. Does this stick, or are we going to get a scrap and reboot? Chad, what do you think?
I think it sticks. I think that I mean, I don't think this is new news. The news that we got of Gunn and Safran isn't like, it's new to us, but it's not new to DC. So they're probably in on everything that has been out. I would assume they wouldn't have put this as the PS scene in the movie that just came out without them being on board for it.
Mike, what do you think?
I agree with Chad. I mean, that'd be terrible if they did that. I mean, and I think it would be unlikely because, like she had said, just because it's new to us, it's been known for a minute or two. I know they can work things out pretty quickly, little scenes like that. But but can I say just how cool he looked?
Oh, go ahead.
I mean, Henry Cavill looked as Superman-y as he's ever looked, even more so. Seeing and what's interesting is that I read somewhere that Dwayne Johnson has in his contract that he can never be defeated by anyone. So I'm wondering if there's going to be an amendment to any contract, or if it's just going to be a draw in any kind of confrontation later on.
So it's going to be a draw, or Black Adam is going to defeat himself. He's going to choose to.
Choose.
But anyway,
right.
But anyway, so we've already written that confrontation.
Yeah,
so.
They can send a check anytime now.
There you go. You're right. Yep. So, okay. All right, and they absolutely better keep Cavill for at least give us 5 more years of this universe. Right the ship. The foundation is there. Keep Cavill on as long as you can keep him. My favorite Superman. Not even close. Nobody else is even close to him. So just got to keep him going. If they scrap all this, I will probably have to start sitting out the DC movies. So that's
I know the feeling, but it can't happen. I think they know. I think the powers that be know where their money is, and yeah.
All right, enough about that. Let's move on. Speaking of super beings, let's go to Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, and I think you're going to take the lead, Mike.
I will. Give me 1 second to pull up my notes.
Oh, what have you been doing?
I mean, I just had to switch screens. Come on. Give me a break.
I've been writing, intros and all that stuff here on the fly, man. You've had plenty of time. Go.
It's called Alt Tab. I'm on the right screen now. Right. Okay, so just a backstory here. When we off camera, off mic, this group were talking about what could we review in the near future. Something good, something some of us haven't read, something.
And since this is the Tom King podcast,
and right. we tend to gravitate quite a bit toward Tom King productions. I recommended Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, and as said, it's written by Tom King and drawn, art and inks by Bilquis Evely, which I can't say enough about her. Right. Colors by Matthias Lopez and lettered by Clayton Cowles, which we mentioned last episode. I didn't know he was a letterer and an artist. So I'm going to do the synopsis here, and I will take a break between issues since this is an 8-issue series to let everybody comment on that issue, and then we'll kind of do it sort of almost like the Watchmen TV show style. We've done that a few times. We just in between issues. So issue 1 introduces us to a villain named Krim of the Yellow Hills as he murders the father of the hero and narrator of the story, a young woman named Ruthie. After seeing her 6 older brothers bluster over how to avenge their father, but ultimately deferring to fate, she takes matters into her own hands, searching the countryside for a bounty hunter to take care of the business. It's at a local medieval-style saloon that she is battered by the very bounty hunter that she attempted to hire. Unfortunately, in the same bar is a drunk and powerless Kara Zor-El with Krypto with her, celebrating her 21st birthday on this planet with a red sun. Drunk or not, Kara makes short work of the bounty hunter. The next morning, Ruthie, who had witnessed Kara's fighting skills, is nursing the hungover and at the same time, the hungover Kara, and at the same time soliciting her to kill Krim. Of course, Supergirl does not kill. So she politely declined the job and returns to her spaceship. While Ruthie persistently implores Kara for her help and ironically chastising Kara for not knowing what it was like to lose her father and whole world, they are attacked by Krim and the other bounty hunter, leaving Kara and Krypto both shot and seriously wounded by arrows. And this allows Krim the chance to steal her spaceship. So that's the first issue in summary.
I don't have a lot of comments about this story, so I'm gonna, just kind of let you guys take care of this one. But we are definitely supposed to think, based on the narration of the writer, the narrator of this, that obviously this girl is ultra intelligent, ultra smart, ultra motivated, right? Because she's not using small words. She brought out her 5-cent words for the narration, and as she's explaining, as she's talking to other individuals, how she speaks. So it's a young character, but it's also a very bright and intelligent, motivated character as well in Ruthie.
Yeah.
and we know that was probably one of my I guess it wasn't a complaint, but it was one of those things where it's narrated by a Ruthie that survives. And so it's kind of a no stakes for Ruthie throughout the story immediately in my head, which I was like, I almost would like it better if the narration wasn't defined as Ruthie immediately, just for that simple thing that I could not know necessarily that Ruthie survived.
So I was a simpleton as I read this issue, right? And initially, it wasn't until issue 6, 7 that I realized, that's not her thoughts. That's her narration telling the story, not just what she's thinking at the time. So it took me a while to catch on to that.
Well, you did read it. You read the 8-issue series in about 3 hours, so you're forgiven.
At least I read it and got it done before the episode.
That's
absolutely.
I don't point any fingers at anybody else who failed to read some issues before an episode was started.
Yeah, well, people can't see me raise my hand.
There you go.
When this was published, issue 1 is under the Infinite Frontier banner. Did that mean anything for this story at that point? Were they trying to do something with this, or was that just
why would that have? It has nothing to do with this. It's just a banner. They had a little there was a little
it's like that's issue 1
marketing effort that was it part of Future State, or was it on the heels of Future State, or was it was
right around that same time of everything being so confusing.
Yeah, but this has nothing. This is sort of almost like a black
black label
or Elseworlds, but still close enough to it's relatable. I don't think it's distancing at all in the way it's told, but I what the Infinite Frontier tells you.
I'm surprised that it wasn't Black Label, since most of King's stuff ends up being Black Label, it seems like. And also, Supergirl's got a filthy mouth in this book, though it is all censored. That's not typical Supergirl, right? That's a Tom King Supergirl.
No, that's a Tom King.
I like that. As we get further in, I'll kind of explain why I like that. But I do, and it was off-putting at first, but I do like it as we get towards the end of the book.
Yeah, it was surprising, like a lot of it was. But I mean, first of all, the art is just unbelievable. The colors,
absolutely.
Yeah, I just can't say enough about it. I like the idea of it being a space fantasy, especially the whole fantasy setting on that first issue. You don't even really know you're in space. It's like you're in medieval Earth.
Yes.
And the narration style and the eloquence from Ruthie really does belie her age. You don't know that it's. And at first, when I did figure out, it may not have been as 7 issues later like Scott, but it wasn't right away that I realized that it was a future Ruthie that was narrating. And it wasn't just her age, and it wasn't just her, because if you remember that bounty hunter, he kind of spoke in the same manner.
Yeah.
It was very, very formal, regal speaking. And in my notes here say a cursing, more human and more real version of Superman is refreshing, because, look, I haven't been excited about Supergirl since the last time I was excited is when she died in Crisis on Infinite Earths. That tells you something. So I've heard a lot of complaints or read a lot of complaints about, this isn't my Supergirl. Well, you know what? Supergirl doesn't sell because nobody wants a white bread, boring version of Superman. And if you think about it, her background is much different than Superman. Other than both being from Krypton, their history, their backstory is much different, and I'll get into that a little bit later. I will say, Cram, right off the bat, I thought, man, this guy's a worthy villain. He'll make a good villain. This guy's
he's good.
He's just a bad dude. So,
and to add on the Evely artwork, she did the Dreaming, like the last Sandman run of the Dreaming. And that's when I kind of discovered her artwork. I don't think she really did anything but like she would do little stories in like collections for like the DC horror or whatever, and she'd do it a 6-page or whatever. But like she really got to do a full run when she got the Dreaming, and she's spot on, like the perfect artwork for what you want to see the Dreaming looking like.
She's a great storyteller, I think.
Yeah,
it's not just pretty pictures.
Yeah. And I love my superhero vibe is really cool with her. Like I would definitely like to see more superhero books with her drawing them as well.
Yeah. So after our introductions in issue 1, in issue 2 we have Ruthie and Kara. And I know sometimes I go back and forth between Kara and Kara, so forgive me. They're forced to take our book passage because the spaceship was stolen. You know, Supergirl, after she got a certain point in space, she was getting into Red Sun territory. She couldn't fly on her own, so she had to book a spaceship. Well, that spaceship has now been stolen by Krim, so they had to book passage on a crammed space ferry. And, you know, there's some pretty cool scenes with a seat-hogging alien. But after a brief stop on an asteroid way station where Supergirl again further convinces Ruthie of her fighting prowess, the cruiser comes across a metal-eating space dragon, and still not nearly powered enough to take on the dragon in her typical fashion, Supergirl resorts to taking a red, quote unquote, which is a pill that kind of transforms her into a phoenix-like creature. I guess it does a lot of things, but in this time, this case, it transforms her into this creature that allows her to defeat the dragon. And probably in the most poignant moment, Ruthie asks Kara if she had ever sought to avenge the deaths of her family, to which Kara said simply, yet tellingly, "No, I didn't," revealing sort of a lifetime of regret. The space ferry nears a planet named Corin that Kara flew to and secured a spaceship previously to take her where her powers would diminish. We learn in a flashback how Kara, Ruthie, and Krypto made it to a mender, which is like a vet and a healer, who healed them both after about a week. But Krypto might not. They didn't think Krypto was going to make it unless they got a sample of the poison used by Krim's arrow to develop an antidote. And it was at this point that Supergirl accepted the offer for looking for Krim and taking the bounty, I guess you'd say.
The only thing I say is I thought, and we learned why later on, but I thought it was weird. It's like, so Supergirl's immune to the poison, but Krypto's not immune to the poison, even though they're both super, right? But I guess that gets explained at the end of the story. But that's what I was thinking at the time as I read it. So.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. First they said, well, it was poison it doesn't affect humans as much as dogs, but then, like you said, at the end of the story, you realize it's a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Shed?
No, and there wasn't really anything to add. We just get to learn. This is kind of just a character building issue. It seemed like, and I love the nasty space bus that they have to take and the interactions with the other people on there.
Yeah. And I included in my synopsis the scene about Ruthie asking Kara if she ever sought to avenge the deaths of her family, and Kara said, "No, I didn't." But if you read the text along with it, you realize, Kara's not Kal-El. He didn't know his family. He didn't know his parents. He was a baby when he was sent off in a spaceship, but Kara knew her family and friends, and you could tell that King did a good job of writing that little piece.
Yeah.
So moving on to issue 3, as their search for Krim continued, so did Supergirl and Ruthie's adventures, righting wrongs and fighting injustices. And I'll say right now, this is like the middle part of the whole series. It's a lot of this going from one adventure to the other, but it really did. You could see their relationship kind of build through those adventures. So much of this issue tells of a story in a town called Maypole where there's race disparities and prejudices that come in the form of skin color of blue and purple. And the pair's investigation led to an assassination attempt on them by a hail of bullets, from which, of course, Supergirl protected Ruthie. Eventually, a mass grave of purples was found, and it was learned that the wealthier blues forced the purples to live segregated in Purpletown. And when a band of space pirates called Barbon's Brigands arrived on the planet and threatened to wipe out the planet unless their demands were met, it was found that the blues couldn't meet the demands. But Krem, being in a jail cell, and this is Krem, the original bad guy, he was in a jail cell and overheard some of this conversation. He offered a solution for the blues to pay a certain amount of cash and supplement it with the enjoyment of the brigands destroying all the purples. Krem joins the brigands and leaves the planet with them. So again, sort of a filler issue, but it was more character relationship building.
This I agree. I think this, and we get into a couple issues where it just feels like we could have done a 4, 5, 6 issue series with it, but it also feels like this didn't have to be a limited series and could have very easily been an ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like that first vibe of this first feeling of going, oh, they could have just continued this past issue 8, and this was an arc within an ongoing, and felt really good in that way, more than maybe any other Tom King book is that I've read.
Oh,
this felt like it had more potential to be ongoing than anything else. I love the when she's fighting with the bodyguard and she gets a bullet essentially hits the corner of her eye and she just swipes it away. I thought it was a tear at first read, like she was like it was shedding a tear for him, but she just wipes that bullet away.
Yeah. It has a very, like, so again, I think I mentioned this before, but one of my favorite series over the last few years was the Dan Slott, Mike Allred Silver Surfer series.
Mm-hmm.
And in that series, you have this all-powerful being the Silver Surfer with this normal companion, Don Greenwood, that are just going on these adventures. And this story has that feel to it. You have Supergirl as the all-powerful Doctor Who-like character.
Makes sense,
and Ruthie coming along as the companion. And kind of narrating, so it's like the perspective of the story, what's going on from us normal people in a world of supers.
Mm-hmm.
So it does have that feel, and again, since I like that story, I'm gonna kind of give you a feel for what I'm gonna think about this story right there.
It's I agree with both of you, and I do. I mean, the only ongoing series I ever read by King was Batman.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like the Batman Catwoman story just went on and on and on and on and on. And not that it was all bad, but it just sometimes I thought this doesn't feel like it's ever going to end. And then, not everything King's written have I really been happy with the outcome, although I can never complain about the quality of the work. I think mostly, even like Heroes in Crisis, it was kind of meandering, but he's got a good voice. It's pretty amazing. But I'll save it for the end of this little synopsis, or all of these synopses. Okay, so issue 4 takes us to another adventure, this time on the planet Parnat. And you guys, you have to think, I'm sitting here writing a synopsis. I'm trying to look to make sure I'm spelling these planets right, but then it doesn't really matter because they still underline with autocorrect, like, that's not a real word.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, on Parnat, this is where Krem and the Brigands, they had laid waste to it. And from little moments like helping the Parnat locals bury their dead at super speed, to consoling the survivors of a brigand raid on Uralan, to inspiring the residents of Yala, the pair make their mark, and Ruthie learns more about Kara. As Kara flies into a local sun, to vent her frustrations because she can't really scream on the planet because it would basically break every building. She goes into the sun and just lets it all out. And basically in frustration of not being able to save the people of this particular planet, Ekvik. Ruthie makes the keen observation that Supergirl's power was not one of action, but of restraint and endurance. And I thought this was a pretty interesting couple panels.
Yes.
It's a constant battle for Supergirl to hold back the heat vision, to warm her breath just to be able to talk, and to slow her pace to walk with you. I thought, man, that is something I'd print out and put on my bulletin board, because that's awesome, really, thinking about that, So
you want it's something that defines that character in a different way. It's like, how is Supergirl different than Superman?
Yeah.
That could be the defining characteristic that is the difference between Supergirl and Superman. Superman's in control, in one way. Supergirl is fighting for control.
Right.
But this puts a whole different perspective on the character.
Yeah. In a later issue, she was talking about Cal or Superman. He'd be all judgy about something. Maybe it was her cursing. I don't know. I can just see that.
Yes.
Too.
Yeah.
He'd be all judgy. Any other thoughts on that issue?
That was 3, right?
That was 4.
Oh, so okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I did think it interesting that Tom King had to be self-referential and talk about the pics in that from Strange Adventures.
Yes, right.
So.
Okay, so it may not be. This may not be in mainstream DC, but it's in the Kingverse.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think that's where I kind of was like, does he have his own universe that he just hasn't really talked about?
All right, so in issue 5, Kara and Ruthie catch up with Krim, only to have him wield a Mordru globe on them. Chad, what's a Mordru? Who's Mordru? Any guess?
I have no clue. This was one of my history questions when I was like, okay, there's some things that are referenced throughout this book that I don't know, and Mordru is one of those. Like, Scott? Is it created specifically for this, or did it exist prior to?
Well, I would assume it has some relationship to Mordred and the Arthurian legends, but that is as far as I can take it.
Yeah, originally maybe that name did. He's basically a wizard that's one of the he's immortal, and he's been around since current times all the way to the time of the Legion of Superheroes 1,000 years in the future, and that's where we see most of his stories is as a villain for the Legion of Superheroes. He's a magician, wizard, super bad guy. But I thought that was kind of cool that this globe, Mordru globe, is magic and very rare. And basically, if they catch their target, they kind of they teleport them far away from where they want to be. And for Kara and Ruthie, it's a planet called Barrington, that's under a green sun, which was built to hold Superman. Its sun's rays are mixed with kryptonite, and I put in parentheses here, see Superman 155 from 1962. Because I was going
to ask you where that was from originally. So
yep, I had to look it up, and sure enough, it's basically Superman got stranded on a planet that was made just to hold him because it had a sun that was infused with kryptonite. And basically Supergirl can do nothing but rest in the shade and wait till the sun goes down. And she didn't kill her, but she was just in excruciating pain. Ruthie goes full Joan of Arc, protecting her from that planet's version of a T-Rex. I thought that was some pretty good scenes there. So that's issue 5.
I like when they're talking when they get there and it's like, oh, Superman's been here, and how long did he last? 45 minutes. Well, how long do we have? 10 hours.
Yeah. And then later on, she's going 45 minutes. Like what a chump! I made it 10 hours. Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's throughout this, but I found it, not knowing much about Supergirl, but it sounds like none of us have read many Supergirl stories. That she's not referred to as her name. She's referred to as Supergirl throughout this entire thing. Even when maybe she's even talking to her about herself, she talks about Supergirl. And I thought that the underuse of Kara throughout it was kind of interesting. It wasn't. You would think that when it's just this human story between her and Ruthie, for the most part, it would become Kara and Ruthie at a certain point. But I feel like Ruthie is constant. It's just Supergirl, and in everything, and maybe that's done on purpose. I don't know.
So I was going to say this comment for the end, but I'll go ahead and throw it in here so I don't have any other comments for this issue. It's that, you have this concept of the unreliable narrator.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So when we see how the story was written versus how the events in the final issue play out, we really don't know for sure how much of this did or did not happen as it is being described.
Mm-hmm.
So when they have it's just going to something as simple as how do they talk to each other?
Yeah, that's true. Good point. Yeah. If the narrator's writing it as a book, as something to be read by others, you would refer to them as Supergirl all the time.
Yep.
And not
nobody else knows. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. I hadn't even thought of that. Yeah, that's something as simple as that. I hadn't even picked up on. But yeah, and I use the name Kara in here because it's easier than spelling Supergirl. So my notes are just full of Kara.
Yes.
That's a good point. Yeah, we'll get back to the whole unreliable narration later. Issue 6, they catch up with Krem and the Brigands on I didn't write the name of the planet. Why, I don't know. Probably because I was trying to do too much. But whatever planet they caught them, and on their way there, she told her full story to Ruthie for the first and last time. So this is Kara's. This whole issue is just about mostly about Kara, her backstory. Kara knew her world. She watched it die. As the story is told in the narration, Supergirl is evading another Mordru globe that was thrown at her by Krem by riding Comet the Superhorse, who's swifter than her, and it's able to outpace that Mordru globe. So while these alternating panels showing them trying to evade the Mordru globe, you also see the story of Kara's past. And it's best to sum it up by saying Kara's loss of Krypton was much different than Kal-El's. She was a young lady with a family and life and friends that she knew and loved for years, whereas Kal-El's loss was more abstract. He knew he lost a lot. He had his crystals where he could still talk to his family. He could see what Krypton was like, but it wasn't as real for him. She literally watched the remaining citizens of the floating Argo City, which, as you guys know, Argo City was a whole city that when Krypton exploded, it was projected out in one piece, and they had a globe over it that protected them from the rigors of space. So radiation slowly killed everybody in that city before her father actually built a ship to take her and her only to Earth. And then also in this issue, Comet takes Supergirl to the end of the universe where it's all white and there's no physics. The physics and magic don't work the same, and the Mordru globe doesn't work, and she simply pops it and she returns it back to Ruthie, Krem, and the Brigands.
This is my favorite issue out of the entire series.
Nice.
I absolutely love this one. This was the issue where I understood Supergirl as the character she is, where it was like she is this disgruntled person who watched her entire world fall apart. No wonder she wants to go get drunk on her 21st birthday.
Yeah.
She's this like curses like a sailor, and just like this is that anger that lives in her, is just watching her whole world fall apart, and it really shapes Tom King's version of Supergirl. I thought this issue did, and I was like, okay, I get why she is this way, just based on that, and then just going those back and forth panels between watching Krypton fall apart and then her racing against that globe is just like, it's a magical issue.
My question for you is, compared to previous origin stories for Supergirl, how close is this origin story to what we have had in the past?
Oh boy. I mean, I'm not E. Nelson Bridwell, so I don't have this encyclopedia mind of Superman mythos, but I want to say that most of the Argo City stories were much simpler, and they all did. I mean, obviously they had her dad, her father, which was Jor-El, Superman's father's brother. He had to ship her off, but the angst and the trauma and the drama that went with it, that was never touched upon in previous origin stories of Supergirl. It was.
But do you think it's true to the origin story?
Oh yeah, it doesn't contradict it at all.
Okay,
no,
okay,
no.
That's good. All right.
No, nothing in my memory sees it as a contradiction. It's just, she was on, that whole city was somehow protected with a dome over it, and when Krypton exploded, it projected it out in space and it floated aimlessly until, and this particular story, you've seen why it, how it kind of met its end, and just seeing her go through all the steps of trying to protect the people and burying all the dead, and man,
while she's a teenager, like she's in her most emotional time period of her life, and she has to go through all of this. Like,
it takes
you don't understand your body already, and then
right. Takes
which
a whole
would
lot
be story-wise within 7 years of when this story takes place, because she just celebrated her 21st birthday, and she said she was 14, at the time of that event. So
it doesn't take me near that much to curse and drink. So all right, okay, let's move on to issue 7. It opens with Ruthie riding Comet on a paradise world and picking fruit. And sharing it with Comet, and it's just an idyllic little scene, and you're like, oh, this is nice. It's a beach. And then you got Krim, who they had captured in the last issue. He's tied to a palm tree, and he's their prisoner. And Kara's off fighting the brigands in space, just out in orbit, just outside. They, even though they're thieves and they're bad guys, they have a sense of honor that's causing them to come back and try to rescue Krim. But Ruthie's left alone with Krim, and at first you could see that, well, you might think that she's just leaving Comet there to protect Ruthie. She's really making sure Ruthie doesn't go kill Krim while she's gone. And, Kara's whole reason to keep him alive, basically, is, well, at least the premise of a reason is to get the antidote to the poison used on Crypto, the dog, super dog. Anyway, so Comet hears they're kind of bantering back and forth, Ruthie and Comet, and all of a sudden Comet's like, he hears trouble off in space, but he knows his last orders from Supergirl was to stay with Ruthie. But Ruthie convinces Comet that, look, if Supergirl needs help, please go out and help her. I promise not to do anything. And that seems like a really short synopsis. I hope I didn't forget anything, but I think it was just a pretty summed up. There was just a lot of dialogue back and forth, in this issue.
I don't have any comments on 7, so that's probably why, because it's a pretty straightforward issue. So
yeah, okay,
yeah, I agree.
Again, it just my memory of that scene makes me think. It just reminds me of just how good Bill Kosevely is. Just really, whether it be a beautiful planet or a not so beautiful, it's just she does a great job creating the scene. And then
this highlights how much Tom King he must just love to write a back and forth. Like he wants to A and B his story all the way through, no matter what story it is. It's gotta have this, and that's where this issue and the last issue it's just like, okay, here's this story going on, and we're gonna run it side by side with this.
You've seen it with Adam Strange in Atlanta. Yep. You've seen it with Scott
Rorschach.
Free and Rorschach, and Rorschach was deep, man. Whew, that was mind bending. But anyway, issue 8. This is the end of the run, and Ruthie makes good on her resolution to kill Krim, even though she promised otherwise to Comet. But she deems it unfair to simply butcher a bound man, so she makes it a fair fight by untying him and placing her sword, which she had actually taken from him.
Did you just say sword?
Sword?
Okay, just checking.
Sword, maybe, yeah, sword.
The W was a little pronounced.
Maybe a sword.
Yeah, sword.
I swear I didn't say sword. She places her sword equal distances, kind of like in a duel between her and Krim. And meanwhile, Comet's out in space. He actually sacrifices himself to save Kara, and he reverts back to his original human form. Ruthie makes a good effort fighting Krim and even takes off his fingers with the sword. And several attempts at taking off his head, her restraint wins out, and she can't kill him. She can't let herself kill him. Supergirl, which was great, by the way, not to interject any commentary in the middle of this synopsis, but seeing her have that restraint and still defeat him was pretty cool. Supergirl returns with the human form of Comet, and despite Ruthie reminding Kara that they needed Krim to save Crypto, she intends to prove to Ruthie that killing is wrong. not by preaching it, but by killing Krim herself and taking the onus off of Ruthie and allowing her to live her life without obsession. Now, remember, I'm writing this synopsis, not necessarily remembering exactly the twist at the end. I'm like trying to figure it out as I go. But the way it's presented by King is that she's trying to say, look, do what I say, not what I do. You don't have to do it. I don't want you to ruin your life by killing him. Just let me do it. Anyway, Supergirl takes the sword, and no matter the protests from Ruthie, she begins to bring the sword down on Krim's neck. And in what seemed like an eternal moment, they reverse roles, and the teacher becomes the student, and the student becomes the teacher. But then Kara says it's too big, and we're too small, giving the impression that she carried out the execution anyway. And at the end of that scene, and that's where I'm thinking when I remember the first time, I'm like, no, they can do all these things to Supergirl, but they can't do that. Surely not. At the end of that scene, it brings us to the time that the story's actually being told with Ruthie as an old woman, and she's being visited by Kara and Crypto. I want to say based on how long how long he was in the Phantom Zone, it's revealed that Ruthie in her story made up the part about Kara killing Krim so that the brigands would only target her for vengeance, not Ruthie. Instead, he was sent to the Phantom Zone. He's there for a few hundred years. He's finally released.
300.
300?
300.
Did I say 300? Or
I don't know. I
think
said a few hundred. I said a few hundred.
Yeah, 3. Okay, you're right, 3.
I think anyway.
It's he's released right at the time of the actual storytelling, and according to Kara, he's rehabilitated. She's telling Ruthie he's contrite. The first 100 years he was an ass, and the second 100 years he was kind of coming around, and then the third 100 years he was actually begging for forgiveness and truly sorry. So he comes out of the Phantom Zone and he sees Ruthie and he's begging for forgiveness. And she clocks him with her cane. This is an old woman, so she didn't kill him. At first, I'm thinking, surely she didn't kill him, but you could kind of see by the figure of him laying on the hill that he was kind of moves around. And that's where we read the last of Ruthie's fictitious story that Kara stabbed Krim through the chest on that beach hundreds of years ago and handed the blade back to Ruthie. So it's a twist within a twist within a twist.
Uh-huh.
But it's also subject to interpretation, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, I took it that she killed him. I thought she killed him when she clubbed him.
I thought so too, yeah.
Yeah.
Who, Supergirl or Ruthie?
Ruthie. When she clubbed him with her cane, I took it that she killed him. Because you cold cock an old man that hard in the head, and it's obviously nearing the end of his lifespan. Somebody doesn't come back from that, I don't think.
Yeah.
So I take it that she killed him, but that's my interpretation of it. You said that everybody's got their own interpretations. That's how I interpret
absolutely
it.
Yeah. And you were the same way, Shed?
Yeah, I thought that it was that way. I mean, the way that he goes to like grab his head, and as the panels go, he goes to touch his head, and then his arm just lays down beside him, and there's no vision of him getting up, but the last line is, and that's where I shall end this long story. So it's not that it is the end. It's just where Ruthie wants to end this long story. So you're absolutely right. It is
when we get Tom King on the show and do an interview with him, we're going to find out. We're going to find out.
That's right.
Once we rename it to the King Cast.
Exactly.
That's all we do. He has no choice but to join us at some point.
I think it's more wishful thinking on my part that I don't want either one of them to kill this guy or to be a murderer. The fact that Supergirl kind of watched it happen and they walked away, I'm like, that leaves a bad taste. So I'm hoping that's not the case. If they wanted to show him being killed, I think if he wanted to be straightforward, he would have made it straightforward. So he does want to leave it up to interpretations.
There's a reason why it's a silhouette also.
Exactly.
It's not directly on camera either.
Yeah, and that's typical for his stories.
Yeah,
he does do that a lot. That's one of the reasons I wasn't a super fan of Mr. Miracle, but I'm like, no, he didn't do that, no. But I think the best work it might be one of my favorite stories I've read in my life, and at least probably the top 20 anyway, and the best King work that I've read.
I think it's definitely his most straightforward that I've read, and in a way. I mean, there's obviously obviously there's the twist that you find out that it's not necessarily the truth is what we're seeing for 8 issues, but it feels the most straightforward and the most emotional. Like the connection to like going, I get this character was probably the most out of anybody.
I'm just smitten with Ruthie as a character. I think I think what a cool, and I know, I read somewhere they were likening this to True Grit, which it is. It's very much like the story of True Grit, all the way down to the well-spoken protagonist, but it's still enough of a different story that I'm okay with, them riffing off of another. I mean, there's, like Mark Twain said, there's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
So, but yeah, overall thoughts as the whole series.
I agree. I think it's one of the best. It's probably the best Tom King story. I love the artwork. This now is an artist that now I've read 2 really great series by Evely that I will watch out for anything that she does and will be very much paying attention to that. And it's just another reason to keep reading King stuff. And it's not going to get me to read more Supergirl necessarily. I don't know. It's not, but because this just seems like a team that you want to check out. It's not necessarily the character you want to check out. It's in a different hand. I'm probably not paying attention to this character again.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike, I did want to ask you the whole thing with Comet having a human form.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was something I was completely unaware of. Where does that come from? What's that from?
It's in Action Comics. I can't remember the exact issue, but it was he got on the wrong side of Cersei, the witch.
Okay.
And she transformed him. I forget Byron was his name. His real name was Byron, from a different planet, and he crossed Cersei, and she turned him into a horse. Somehow he got superpowers. I forget that part exactly how I got this, but that was back in the Silver Age when super pets were a big thing. You had Comet the Super House and Beppo the Super Monkey and Crypto and Streaky the Super Cat, and half of them belonged to Supergirl because, of course, in the '60s girls could have little pets. That was a cutesy thing.
Yeah,
but so that was true to the mythos as well. I didn't expect him to die, but
a worse Diddy. I guess that's again.
Yeah. It's and even if he did, I mean, somebody will bring him back. Somebody will bring back. Conveniently forget about this story.
And if this is in continuity or not, being
sure
its own thing.
Tom Kingiverse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Grades.
Yeah.
Go.
I would go 9.4 near mint for me. I own it already, so the Scott Reed rule of you have to own it at a certain point.
And plan to keep it. Yeah,
that's right. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, I'm gonna go with an 8.0. Very fine. Which to me, it's on that line. This is certainly the best Supergirl story I've ever read. Of course, that's a very low quantity of stories to begin with, right? Because I don't know that I've ever bought Supergirl off the shelf. Okay, so that's a low bar, but it is. But if somebody were to come to me and say, "Hey, I like Supergirl, you need to read this," right? So it's kind of like one of those things. Do I want to own this so that I can share this with other people? It's right there on that line. So that's why I was bouncing back and forth between 7.5 and 8.0, and it's so good that I feel like it needs to get into that. Maybe I would buy it and put it on my shelf. That's why I almost went 7.5, but I'm gonna give it an 8.0 because it deserves better than a 7.5. So,
all right. I think I'd have to go with one grade higher than Shad with a 9.6, and that would be a near mint plus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And just because, like I said earlier, this is in the top 20 stories that I've read, I could reread this over and over again. There's been Tom King stories that I was like, man, this guy's kind of messing with my head, and This was not. It was more straightforward. It had superhero, or at least hero aspects to it. It had a level of humanity that you don't always get in a superhero comic. It wasn't gritty, but it was real. It had just about everything I like in a story. I just don't get very often. No, I if I could get this in hardback, which I don't know if it's out like that yet, but when it does come out, I'm going to get it in hardback, put it on the old shelf.
There you go. Nice. All right. Okay, so our second review walkthrough for this episode is Black Stars Above. I will try to keep this a little bit shorter, primarily because it's nowhere near as good as Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. And okay, so why are we talking about this book? Well, one, we always like to try to mix it up. We do some Marvel, do some DC, do some indie stuff. So I bought a collection, this stack of books. The cover of issue number 1 really struck me. I think it has some really cool artwork on some covers. You have, basically it's a lot of, we'll just say, Indigenous American covers. Has kind of that style of art. That's our main character.
Indigenous Canadians,
French Canadian.
Yes.
Right. Yes. So, so anyway, this story, it's a 5-issue series from Vault, Black Stars Above. It is written by, I got to get to the back to that page, Lonnie Nadler. All right. Artist is Jenna Cha, colorist Brad Simpson, letterer Hassan Ostame El Howell, and I'm probably butchering most of those names. I do like that they included this little note acknowledgement on the artist page. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Coast Salish nations of Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish, and those are, I guess, for lack of a better term, and I don't know if it's an appropriate term or not, I'm going to say tribe related to the Indigenous Americans that were in this area of the country at the time this story took place, on whose unceded traditional territories this book was written and illustrated. So some text was taken from the HBCA archives of Manitoba, existing within the public domain. So they had this nice acknowledgement for our character. So I'm going to butcher most of the names because I am not French Canadian. And I'm going to try to go through this relatively quickly because, again, the premise was very interesting, but it was a tough read for me. The basic premise of the book is we have Eulalie Dubois, who it's 1887. She's presented with the opportunity to make some money by delivering a package to this northern town, and what happens to her on this trip. So issue 1 starts the issue. We have this trapper. He's out trapping lynx in this very now barren northern land. The trapper is basically journaling, and you can tell from the journaling that he's going crazy from the isolation. He captures a lynx, and this lynx's eyes are basically black ink as he captures it. So switching over to Eulalie Dubois, she's half French, half Indigenous Canadian American. She learns that her father has basically promised her in marriage to a neighboring family. Of course, this is not something that Eulalie wants. So she's approached by a man and asked to deliver a package to a northern town. The northern town is never named as far as we know. So because she wants to escape her circumstances, Eulalie agrees to deliver the package. And then her first night in the wilderness, she sees what we will come to know throughout this series as the Black Stars. These very large black ink blots who basically cover the moon, and they have some type of ladder or staircase that kind of descends down them, which will become a factor later on. And then, of course, this package that she's been asked to deliver and not to open basically begins to speak to her, and we get the idea that she actually opens it, though we don't actually see anything at the end of the first issue. So, comments, thoughts on issue 1?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I'm sorry, I'm kind of looking at Chad to see if he's getting ready to talk.
Go.
The first thing that came to me is that it was written well enough that the description of the cold lined up with that cold snap we had here last week, and I'm like, oh my God, that is to the bone, and I'm feeling the cold that they're talking about. So I don't know if it's actually because it was cold here that for those few days or what, but I thought the construction of the story started well. It was kind of your typical, youth getting tired of the same old. I thought it was nice to see that it's this being half French, half indigenous type of family with the stifling parents, with the prearranged marriage. I thought all that was well done. You gave us the motivation for her leaving them on her adventure.
Yeah, the imagery I think is what captured me most in this. I'm usually a words guy, but the words there were a lot. It seemed like it lacked a general full-on direction through everything, and maybe a second pass at the writing would have been good. But the art was great. I love there's a slight horror element to this book. The skinning of the whatever, the dad skinning like some kind of nasty
rat.
creature.
It was a rat.
Yeah, rat.
Muskrat or something.
Yeah. And the eye of the lynx, that was like one of my favorite things, and you see it kind of throughout. Just that idea that empty black eye is actually a pool of ink and you can touch it, and it's that's kind of cool and gross. And we see a lot of the woods throughout this, but I do like I thought the imagery of the woods are really well done. I like the arrows, the way the way the story builds is good. It's just that it feels like it's not executed to its complete fullest as it could have been on there. But issue 1 I really think is really cool, and it sets us up for a neat journey.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the creepiest stories that I've ever read. So we talked about in our Halloween episode, right? It's tough to do horror in comic books.
Yeah.
Right. So this one I think did a very good job, and I thought it succeeded until we get to the end of issue 4. And then that's where the story for me kind of falls apart just a little bit. But absolutely very creepy, and it maintained that creepiness, through each of these subsequent issues. So now not as much happens in these subsequent issues. There's not as much to talk about. So probably get through the rest of these really quick here. So issue 2, basically Yuli is continuing her journey. She travels, basically finding limited living things and lots of dead things on her path. We finally get to see the contents of the package, which is, for lack of a better way of describing it, is this Cthulhu-looking albino baby. Then at the end of issue 2, Yuli stumbles upon this cabin that does actually have some occupants. So she's been out here in this barren land and is actually coming across some other living individuals. So I don't know. What else do you want to add about issue 2?
I just think the Cthulhu. First, I'm thinking you're right. Cthulhu is probably a better description. I was thinking like a jellyfish, very ugly jellyfish. But it's pretty heartwarming. You could see that she took it out of its package because it was afraid of the dark and the confinement, and you could see a little bit of a relationship build between Eulalie and the creature. I don't know what it's even. I don't know though there was ever a name given to it. But
the infant, I think, is what it's referred to. It.
Yeah.
It's almost like the Mandalorian, the child.
The child.
Yes. And it's it doesn't like heat, even though she needs heat to survive. He sleeps, tries to keep away from it because he self-generates heat. You learn at some point,
which is part of what helps her survive.
Exactly. Yes.
It is interesting to me, and as the infant, thank you, Shad, we progress through these, you think initially it's talking in some foreign language, but when you kind of stop and read what the infant is saying kind of phonetically and syllabally, you can kind of understand, oh, no, that's some quote-unquote baby talk going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Break it up, and if you it was tough sometime to figure it out, but if you took a little bit of time, you could often figure out what message the infant was trying to convey, which I thought was you had to work to get that a little bit, which I thought was a nice touch.
And it got better. You could tell it was learning to talk as it went pretty quickly.
The night snow scenes, like towards the end, were awesome in this, and especially like when we meet one of the people that live in the cabin. You've got the guy that's wearing like the wolf head, and just that kind of looks like a big nasty wolf creeping up, and then he starts to stand up, and I was like, wow, that's some really good artwork.
And that was a legitimately scary part. I thought, oh my God, first I'm thinking it's a wolf. Then I see it's a guy, and you don't know if he's a friend or foe. And that was all well done.
Yes.
And she's pretty brave. She's like,
she grabs that axe.
Yeah, she's like, come on, man,
bring it,
bring it.
She's ready to eat, so she's like, bring it. I'll eat some
Yeah,
more.
yeah.
Issue 3. So this cabin that Yuli stumbles upon, basically the occupants of the cabin are crazy. All right, and things get pretty crazy there. So Yuli leaves, discovers this kind of red leaf tree, which was very reminiscent of Game of Thrones, just a little bit. This tree out there in the middle of nowhere. But that's neither here nor there. But the big discovery there is the journal of the trapper from issue 1. All right, is also there. And I forgot to mention, I don't remember if it's at the end of issue 2 or if it's here inside of issue 3, where there are actually multiple pages of just prose where you're reading okay, thank you. They're reading just what that trapper had written, and you can kind of see him going crazy and his interactions with those black stars, which also had me thinking whenever I was reviewing in my mind how often we saw the black stars. Most of the time it was, up until this point, it was described to us, not actually pictured.
Right.
But it felt like it was a lot more prevalent, but it's because of this prose portion. That also probably says a lot about me as a comic book reader, because I remember back in the day, if I pick up an issue of Cerebus and Dave Sim had decided to do half the book in prologue, I would just skipped it. I just read the pictures with the word balloons, right, and skipped the rest of it and just went on with my day. But I actually took the time to actually read this, because I feel like the writer here wants to be more of a novelist as opposed to a comic book writer, but that's just me, saying that. So
in the journal, I mean, I read it because I thought, well, maybe this will explain some things.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of did, but it didn't explain everything. I mean, like the infinite. There was in this issue here, there was the bottle of brandy wine that never ran out, and then when she's holding the cup, she's either having a vision or just I don't know, just weird things you don't know why it's even happening. Yeah. But it is in issue 3 where all that journal was found. It was after
I actually have it in my notes right here, where it says we get several pages of prose. And of course, the issue ends after she's had this experience where she somehow walks out on a frozen lake and the ice collapses beneath her and she goes into the lake. So.
Yeah.
Anything else for 3?
Nope.
All right. So issue 4, while in the water, Yuli has some visions, right, of these individuals. This was actually a really cool effect that the artist used. Is like a lot of the text would be upside down.
Yes.
So like in the back of the cabin, she was talking to the guy laying on the floor. And text would be upside down, and you had to work for it a little bit sometimes in this book. And the same thing happened here. Some of the artwork is inverted, and it's kind of an interesting effect. But ultimately, she breaks free from the water. And basically, this is where we really have our most extended time dealing with the black stars. Is she's seeing its impact, the weird snowflakes, all that fun stuff. So ultimately, she climbs that black star ladder, we'll call it, and enters this town. And this is just where things kind of go off the rails. Because inside this town, as far as I can tell, because there's some mention in the story up to this point about Norsemen having appeared, and I kind of get the feeling we have some type of Icelandic or whatever community that's what's up there wherever these black stars, the black star ladder led her to. So,
and I don't ever want to see an apostrophe in a word again.
Yes.
Studying and guide and way.
Yeah, I almost like I want to take this to the writer and go, read this to me the way that it was in your brain, because I want to know what you were wanting to achieve with this.
Yes.
I went with Swedish Chef is what I went with.
Swedish. I think you're right though, because it did mention Leif Erikson or Eric Red and Leif Erikson and all that stuff. So it could be,
So I decided that that's what this village is supposed to be. So I kind of tried to read it without accent, but even thinking about that type of accent, man, I had a hard time trying to imagine how it actually would sound.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the first time you hear like Wolverine talk legitimately, like in a show, because he's Canadian and you were used to him either talking, American English, and all of a sudden you hear somebody, because obviously Hugh Jackman doesn't do the Canadian accent. If you were to actually hear him, you would be, is that Wolverine? So I'm sure it'd be one of those situations. So, all right, issue 5. I'm just going to go ahead and wrap it up here.
Yep.
I'm just going to say that the town is really, really weird. All right. So Yuli ultimately escapes the town, right? And then we see that she has survived this adventure, and she's getting on a train. She's leaving, basically escaping this life that was laid out for her that she didn't want. And to kind of wrap up the story, the infant is there on the train with her. They somehow managed to get an entire car to themselves, but that's not it.
She deserves it. I don't know if she had the money for it, but she deserved it somehow.
Well, I think she got her money, and it was meant to sound like a lot of money for the time.
Right.
But I think it would imply that she got her money when she made the delivery. So
my goodness. There was a scene in that, not the last, maybe the second to last issue, where it looked like the main two characters in that town, the man and the woman, they were sitting down at dinner with her and looked like they were eating little pieces of a little white thing. And I'm thinking, did they just kill the infant and they're eating him? I'm like, oh my God, that'd be horrible. That would be horror to me. I'm like, ugh.
Well, that might have been what the plan was, because whenever there was that one point where she goes out and there are those other larger infant-like creatures that are kind of on the edge.
Yeah.
So maybe that is the implication. Maybe not that infant, but another
different one. Yeah.
Infant. It was it was just bizarre. So
well, yeah, it was that as soon as she entered the Black Star, everything was weird until she set fire to the town and returned, and it was like, okay, I'm back on board. I'm good with this again. Yeah. But it was just, and maybe that's what it was meant to be. Is this just like this thing that messed with your head and made you not really understand what's going on, and then you go, oh, she's getting out, and you're back on track with the story again.
You know what I think?
What's that?
I think that we're making more sense of this now talking it in a group than we did individually.
So I actually good.
Yeah, this because by myself I couldn't make sense of it.
Yeah, I agree.
I think what I would have liked to have seen, and especially with like the acknowledgement they had at the front of the book, is that whenever she went into the Black Star, that there was some tie to Indigenous American mythology, as opposed to, let's go Northern European.
Right.
With this story. And maybe it's because that's what they needed to do, because Northern Europeans needed to be the bad guys, and they needed a bad guy for the story. So maybe that's why they went that way. But I would have liked to have seen, because that's not something I've read a little bit of mythology, Indigenous American mythology in the past. I don't remember a whole lot of it. I think it would have been nice to see some of that storytelling. I thought it would have fit nicely, especially with the art style. I think it would have been really, really cool. So it's kind of one of those cases where I didn't quite get what I wanted.
Well, maybe you're right though, because there's that panel. It's in my digital copy. It's 133, and they're severing a limb from a creature like the infant, and there's this panel of, I don't know if it's a queen or whatever with the Canadian flag, and then there's this guy with a noose around his neck, and then there's this war scene. So maybe it is a visualization of the French invading, and that is, you might be right. Maybe that is why it was villainized by the white people.
But it was the most nonsensical page in the whole book, I thought. I could not make, but I did get at least that much out of it, that this is a message about European colonization and taking away the lands of the indigenous people.
Yeah.
Because there she's actually seeing a vision of the future, right? Because I assume that's supposed to be Queen Elizabeth, that's there at the top of that page is is the assumption that I made.
I wasn't sure if there was a connection with Canada and Queen Elizabeth. Okay.
Well, because that would be is that which province recognizes or actually, because Canada was at one time English, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
it's still a Commonwealth of England. Yeah.
And they still, and they have the Queen is on.
Yeah, they still consider that the queen and the king, their queen and their king. They're still one of the 12 or so commonwealths in the world.
I did not realize that.
Yeah, they're having a discussion about
like Australia, South Africa.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So maybe the infant and those creatures are the tie to Native American mythology.
Maybe they are, and this maybe is something I don't recognize.
Right. Yeah.
If that is the case, that is something that I, not being familiar with that, should have been made more explicit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
You know? So
I love the art, though. I have to say.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I dig the art. That's why again, it was the covers that made me think that this is something I really, really wanted to read. So
yeah.
All right, tough decision time. Giving this grades, this is gonna be tough.
I will say that you guys made it better as we talked about it.
Okay.
It does. It is. It's a lot better now than it was when I started.
Yeah.
I'll go first.
Okay.
I haven't gone first yet on the grading, to be fair here, so I'd rather taint your opinion than you taint mine. I'm gonna, just because I do want to give credit for the effort, even if the execution wasn't where it should have been, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 6.5. It's not something I'd buy again or key. But I just don't think, it could have been done better to be more accessible to people like us, or me at least. But I'd say quality wise, it's got a lot of qualities. It's just gotta, like I said, it takes a group of us to figure it out.
Yes. I am exactly where you're at. I'm a fine plus 6.5. I was gonna be at a 5.0 before we discussed this together, and I was like, I do like this story better now that I understand more of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm somewhere in the 5.0 to 6.0 range. I'm trying to decide where I want to lay it. I guess I'm gonna go 6, because if 6 to 8 is that range where it's like, would I recommend to somebody under a very specific circumstance?
Yes.
Would I recommend this? You got somebody who likes horror or creepy or non-superhero, then maybe I could recommend this story to them. It's a tough recommend. So it's got to be that oddball person, that wants to read something completely different. I wouldn't just recommend it to your regular comic reader. So I'm going to put it at the very bottom of my range for that. I'm going to put it at that 6.0 range. And a lot of it is because the art, and especially, I really did enjoy the first 3 issues. That build up and getting to the town, it just fell flat for me at the town. So the last couple of issues kind of just fell off for me. So if it had a stronger ending, I think I could have really dug this. And I don't know that maybe it wouldn't go up after a second read. It's like sometimes things that are a little bit denser, you got to give it a second chance. Like even something as simple as the Batman movie. It's like first time I watched it, I wasn't real big on it, but then on a rewatch, I felt a lot more positive about it. Right. And that may be the case. Maybe not being as rushed. We had a lot of stuff to read for these last couple episodes, so I think we kind of rushed some of this stuff. So. All right, CLZ Shake.
Shake it up.
Who wants to go first? I'll go first. Last time. All right.
Oh, this is Batman One Dark Knight, issue 3. This is, speaking of Jacques, from last episode. This is Jacques' writer-artist debut book. Not this one, but it's the series that I think is his first writing credit. If I remember right, and I still haven't read this yet, but it's in my list. I can't say even that it's on the top of my list because it's one of those oversized things, and I put them away in a different spot because they don't fit in my pile of 2 reads.
So, do you put everything you buy into CLZ immediately?
Yes.
Okay. See, I don't do that until I decide I'm going to keep it. I don't.
Okay.
So I do. Even if it's a double and I plan on getting rid of it, I'm too OCD. I gotta put it in, and then if I sell it, like to you, then I'll
that's too much work.
Same category.
But I'll double. I have to do it because I'll double buy if not. I'm notorious.
That's exactly why I do it too. Yeah, because I'm afraid I'll double buy.
I had a short box of duplicates.
Yeah.
Before I did that.
All right. Let me see if I can do this where you can see. I don't know why it's showing all white like that.
Turn at an angle. Angle it. Up and down. Down. Turn it. Nope. Okay. Yeah.
Wow. No.
That's some possessed phone. Okay. Well, we got a 90s comic.
Uh-oh.
It's not my favorite era.
It's got a foil cover.
It's Batman 456 from November of 1990. Guaranteed this was bought many years later because I quit buying from like 89 all the way through 94.
Is that the issue before Jason Todd or Robin gets a new costume?
It is because it's got. I bet it is because it's by Alan Grant.
Okay.
It's got, and if I could show you the doggone cover, it's just two. It's got two like images of the Robin costumes.
I'll just look it up while you're talking.
Yeah, and
did you get to vote on which one it was?
Yeah, that was a thing back then. Written by Alan Grant, penciled by Norm Brayfogle, editor Denny O'Neil. It was Scarecrow was the villain, and that makes sense what you're saying because it's got on the cover it's got what looks like Jason Todd staring at the original Dick Grayson Robin costume in one of those trophy cases.
I actually have a very beat up copy of Batman 457 over on the floor. That's the reason why it says new Robin costume at the top of the page. So I'm actually staring at issue 457 right now.
I'll be darned.
And that's it. It's where he gets his new costume. Yep. So
okay. I don't know. Yeah. No, we're good.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Now mine's going. There we go. Oh, hey, something not Micronauts or ROM or Star Wars. I got new Teen Titans. So, hey, we've got a Judas contract. This is the annual, which is part 4 of the Judas contract. And this is one of the, quintessential Teen Titans stories, right? Because you've got Deathstroke, you've got Terra, written by Marv Wolfman, art by George Perez. This is the story arc where we get Nightwing, right? So that's one of the big things. But you actually have spoilers. Terra infiltrates the new Teen Titans. She actually, issue 28, I think, was her first appearance. So this was probably about 2 years after her first appearance, where we find out that she is basically a mole of Deathstroke in the Teen Titans to bring the Teen Titans down. We meet Jericho, which is Deathstroke's son. There's a whole story about how he, loses his voice because of Deathstroke. But anyway, Marv Wolfman, George Perez, especially George Perez artwork, just an excellent story. The Nightwing costume doesn't hold up, but so you have the nice flare wings, on the
disco costume.
Exactly, right. But so 4-part series, definitely something I'm happy to have in my collection and have actually, read and kind of remember the basic story for once.
Yeah, that's a good one.
All right, so Shad, what are we going to have on episode 145 when we get around to it?
145 is going to be previews.
Woo! All right, Mike, somebody wants to reach out to you. Where would they do that at?
It would be at m.atchison90@gmail.com. Please write.
Shad, what about you?
You can find me on Facebook. That is Shad Schubert, SHAAD SCHUBERT.
And I'm Scott Reed. You can find me at birdcomics.com, and we'll be back soon with previews.
You want to talk about stupid stuff? Here's my stack of stupid stuff. So I don't know, and I got a buddy who's a picker up in Centralia, and he said, "Hey, this lady brought in it's some autographs and it's just a few comics. Do you want it?" I said, "Sure." So he picked it up for me, and here's some of the nonsense that was in. I don't know how well you'll be able to see these. So this is Bob and Doug McKenzie signed.
Oh,
Yeah.
hey, go. Hey.
Yeah, it's what is it, Dave
Thomas.
Yeah, Dave Thomas. Yeah, oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, Dave Thomas. He's the one that signed this one. And apparently this person was a Doctor Who fan, so this is like the 6th, 7th, or 8th Doctor. Okay. Right. Okay. And then one of the cases, the companion for that 7th or 8th Doctor. So I got that signed. Unfortunately, they're all signed to Conrad. And then of course the guy who played. What's his face? Yeah. 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 And then somebody. Steele. I guess is who this is. Right. Yeah. Legends of Tomorrow. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, okay. Well, I don't know what I'm gonna do with those. I gotta find somebody that, it's gonna be $10 a piece for him. Find somebody named Conrad over here. There you go. And it'd be perfect gift for them. So